Hi everyone. Angular libraries. Don't we all have like love-hate relationship with Angular libraries? Well, yes, they are convenient, very powerful, useful, but the libraries are also the source of pain when we want to update. Right? ng update v18. Well, your Angular library is still not updated. And most of the times, it's actually not the author's fault at all. We actually just should send all the hugs to all the open source library authors. And we shouldn't put the blame on them. Maintaining an open source library is hard work, and most of the time it's free. So it is no surprise that some libraries just fall off and leave the users hanging with an old versions. Well, so in today's talk, truly hope that to make that hard work a little easier for you library authors or expired library authors. Yes, it would be hard. It would be a lot of hard work. So bye-bye free time. But with the right tools, we might be able to navigate, the ecosystem, the open source ecosystem, a little bit easier and have a little more joy while still providing value to the community. So welcome to Angular Libraries with NX. My name is Chau. I'm an engineer at NX, and I'm also an Angular GDE. You can find me on Twitter and or GitHub. I believe I have my email on my GitHub, so you can contact me there as well. So the agenda for today is what actually is an Angular library, and how can you create an Angular library today with Angular CLI? How can NX help? And if we have time, we can look at an example. All right, so Angular library. Well, Angular library is a library that follows an Angular package format. So this is the Angular package format. That's the link to the official documentation on Angular package format. I highly recommend to read through the documentation if you don't know or not familiar with the Angular package format. But why? Why do we need Angular package format? There are many points, but I'm going to just point out a couple. First, it ensures seamless integration with other tools. Now, the JavaScript ecosystem is probably one of the fastest moving ecosystem that I've seen personally. So your libraries output, the outputs of your libraries should be able to work with different tools like Webpack, ESBuild, Vite, whatever. Right? And we actually witnessed this firsthand with the migration from Webpack to the ESBuild builder. Well, you just changed a property in the angular.json file, and your libraries still just work. Just the application change. Second is the secondary entry points. Well, secondary entry points helps with code splitting and lazy loading these split chunks. An example is Angular core testing or any of the Angular material components. And the third important point is optimization with partial compilation. So that is a partial compilation. That is basically how you set up a configured compilation mode to be partial. If you create generate an Angular library using the Angular CLI, this is what you get out of the box. And for context, partial compilation means that Angular compiler, when they build your library, they will partially compile your library components in your library. Why partial? Because your library needs to work with multiple versions of Angular, so they cannot fix with a specific version. For example, if you use Angular 17 to build an Angular library, and maybe you use signals, and signals were available from Angular 16, you really don't want to leave the Angular 16 user base behind just because you use Angular 17. So that's the point of partial compilation mode. All right. So there are more to Angular package format, but those 3 points are probably the most recognizable to library authors. And all of these are provided to you or taken care of for you by ng Packager. And this is a package maintained by the Angular team to help you compile and package Angular library to conform with the Angular package format. All right, next, let's talk about Angular CLI. Of course, you can start your library author live today with Angular CLI. And you can create a workspace. So to start your Angular library, you have to have a workspace with no application. So this is how you do it with the Angular CLI. And you can take a look at that link as well to learn how to create libraries. And this is the output of that command. So you have an empty workspace with Angular JSON, package.json, and projects folder. Right. You can see it into your workspace, and then you can start generate a library, and that is the output. You get a library inside of the projects directory. Excuse me. And that command also set up the project inside of the Angular JSON for my library, and you can actually run the build command, and that's the build output. It's conformed to Angular package format. However, and I guess that's all you get with the Angular CLI in terms of building libraries or managing libraries. So what about secondary entry points? Well, you have to create the new entry points manually. So you have to learn about how to create entry point. What does it need to be an entry point? Comma, not comma literally, but the Angular CLI still generates test executor, target architect, the test architect for the library. So you still use comma. So now if you want to migrate over to Jest, now you have to do it yourself. And then scalability. So when in a project or in a library with a lot of entry points, for example, this is ng extension. We have more than 40 entry points. And so imagine having to run test lins every time one of these change, or every time you have like a new entry point that you want to expose. So that takes a long time. And other details like documentation, storybook, end-to-end test, all of these kind of on your own with Angular CLI. And then, before I forgot, there's also schematics. Where's your ng add? How do you do ng update? How do you provide that to your users, right? So you as Angular engineers, you know what you want. You know what your user want in terms of libraries. So, and before you even get to build your Angular libraries, you have to manage all of these like headache. What are the missing pieces, right? So we can do better. I feel you. And here comes NX. So what is NX? Well, in Manfred's slide, he mentioned a little bit about NX, library modular, caching, and all of that stuff. So I'm just quickly go over it. For those who don't know, NX started out as a monorepo tool, and specifically for Angular, but now it is more of an agnostic build tool with advanced CI capabilities. So that is a monorepo, so apps, libraries, and other applications like documentation. And CLI is familiar syntax to the Angular CLI, so NX build, NX serve, NX test. And performance, you have caching out of the box. So this is how you create an NX workspace. So create NX workspace and the name of your workspace. I'm going to give it a preset. So you can just say preset apps. And then the workspace type is integrated. Now, integrated means that you have apps, libs, and you use plugins to connect all of the pieces together. You can also have a standalone mode, which means it is for a single application in type of deal, like an Angular CLI application. That is the standalone mode. And this is the output of that command. Next, we're going to install the Angular plugin to start building out Angular libraries and stuff. Next, we can generate our first library with NX Angular :library. There's a lot of options like Tailwind, what the style sheet you want to use, standalone or not, what unit testing you want to use. There's a lot of options, so that's help. We'll show you a lot of options. But in this case, because we want to publish this library, so I'm going to say publishable, and I also want to say import path, my library. That import path will be your npm package name when you publish it. If you want to do scoped library like Angular, then this is what you want to put in your import path. I want to use Jest for my unit test runner. And I want to put this library inside of libs/my library. And this is the output. So you have ngpackage.json file, that's for ngpackager. And you have project.json file, that is the Angular JSON, but like on a per project level. And of course, you have the package.json because you're going to have to publish this library. Right off the bat, you can just run test this library to see if it's actually working. And for sure, it works. And the first time it runs takes 2 seconds. But then if you run again without changing anything, the cache kicks in, and you get like 38 milliseconds. All right, next, secondary entry points. Well, NX got you with NX Angular :entry point. So this is like a built-in generator to the NX Angular plugin. You can give it a name. I call it first entry point, and what library this entry point belongs to. So my library. And this is the output. All right, so ngpackage.json, so that requires for ngpackager to recognize this kind of like directory as an entry point, and then also the index.ts, which is the public API for this entry point. You can run the build my library, like the top level library, and you can see the output with it will build the library and as well as the entry point. And this is the output. The dist output of the build. You can see that it conforms to Angular package format, and so include your first entry point in there. If we stop here, we have the same scalability problems as with Angular CLI. So let's create another entry point so we can go into further details. So this is my secondary entry point, right? You're going to run that command to recreate that second entry point. And let's use the first entry point inside of the secondary entry point. Now let's run NX graph. So NX has a graph command to show the project graph, the graph of your projects inside of your workspace. And right now, if I run NX graph, this is what shows up. It's just my library. So where's my entry points? How can I tell from the graph that the secondary entry point depends on the first entry point? So that information is lost on the graph. And also, it's lost to NX as well. So NX doesn't really know what happens to your entry points. So NX operates on projects level. So in order for NX to better manage your library and its entry points, so each entry point should be an NX project with their own lint and test targets. Now the build target, we still have to build from the top level entry point, top level library, so that all of the entry points are built correctly with ngpackager. But the entry point themselves can actually run test and lint on their own, right? You don't have to test the second entry point if first entry point change. Well, we can definitely fix our entry point, the current setup manually, but what if you have a lot of entry points before you realize that, oh, I need to turn my entry points into projects? Or imagine this is your new contributors, right? New beginners coming into your projects. They don't know what to do, how to create new entry points, so they use NX Angular, so they do what? So now you have to document the steps to turn an entry point into a project. You have to explain why to your newcomers. So there's a lot of documentation work, which usually get lost or not updated. Well, NX can help with a concept called local or workspace plugin. So let's go with that. So remember our command to generate an entry point. So that is the plugin name, and that is the generator. Well, what if we can have a My Workspace plugin with our custom entry point generator? And we can definitely do that. So next, we just install the NX plugin. Wow, a lot of plugins. And with this plugin, it has a generator to generate a new plugin for your workspace. So we can generate a new plugin. I call it my workspace plugin, and I put it in libs my workspace plugin. So now, on kind of like the directory level, my workspace plugin is on the same level at my my library. So they are all libraries in NX from NX perspective. So this is a my workspace plugin. It's just a TypeScript project. Next, we can generate a generator for my workspace plugin, and I name this generator entry point, and that's where I want to put it. And again, this is the output. So inside of source, I have generators, I have entry point, and all the files for the entry point generator, and also the generators.json file. So this is the collection of all of the generators to, inside of my workspace plugin. Allows NX or Angular CLI to recognize those as schematics or as generators. Next, I want to also create another generator called convert to project, also into my workspace plugin. So what is an NX project, right? If we talk about NX operates on projects. There are different scenarios, but in this particular scenario for like Angular libraries and entry points, a project JSON inside of a directory annotates or let NX know that that directory is a project. So we need to add project.json to both the entry points. So this is, I don't know if you can see it. This is the generator function. The first argument is the tree, which is the file tree the generator operates on. Next is some schema, some options that is generator accepts. And first, we're just going to grab the project root. We're just going to grab the project root from the name. So when you say NX generate entry point, the name of the entry point, so that's it's going to be that options.name. Then we're just going to do some checks. Say, hey, you don't have this entry point, so we can just return early. And then say, if this already has a project JSON, then we're not going to do anything. All right. So next, we're just going to grab the project configuration from the top level library, which is my library. And this is the whatever inside of the project.json of my library. And then we will add a project configuration for my entry point. And in here, we're going to add a test target, which uses the same configuration for the top level library, but also, but only one difference is that we have a test path pattern. So we only target this entry point, and also a lint target. And this is our entry point generator. So entry generators in NX is just functions or async functions. Most of the times, you can compose them by calling the generators. So we can import the generator, the original entry point generator from NX Angular plugin. We can import our convert to project generator from our local workspace plugin, and then we call them. So we call the secondary entry point. We pass in options.name. We know what library we want to create this entry point for, so we just hard code the my library, and then we call the convert. So by composing the original one and our new convert to project generator, now we have a new generator to generate new entry point. So now this is what you just put in your documentation for contributors. Say, hey, you want to create new entry point, this is what you're going to call, you want to run. And now let's try to generate a new entry point. So now because entry point is like correspond to two generators on two different plugins, and NX is going to show you a list of all the plugins with the local workspace plugin on the top. So we're going to pick that one. And this is the result of generating a new entry point. And of course, I see that my project.json is there for the third entry point. Let's also let's also run convert to project for first and second entry points. And let's use second entry point in the third entry point. Oops. Now if we run NX graph again, we will now see a clear indication that the dependencies of third entry point to second entry point to the first entry point. So we see this clear indication that, oh, this is my project graph. So this is how they work together. And there's more. Well, let's run length on the first entry point. And just run again, of course, caching. Right, now second entry point, again, cache. But let's update second entry point. Now remember, second entry point depends on the first one. And the third entry point depends on the second entry point. So let's just update that, make a random update. So now we run nx graph affected. So affected graph is a graph that shows the affected projects based on the Git history. So because we change second entry point, the third entry point, which depends on second entry point, get changed as well, get affected. So with that, we can run affected commands with affected target lengths. We want to run length of what affected, and we can run them in parallel. So now the second entry point and the third entry point gets rerun. But if we go back to, and we run the first entry point, it is not affected, so it's pulled from cache to the moon. So you can have a lot of entry points following this kind of light approach. Applications. Wow, why do we talk about the application in like a library talk? Well, you need the application to test your UI components. If your library is a UI component library, right? You want to test those UI components, see if they work. You also need an end-to-end application to test your test application. Oh, all right, maybe an application for your documentation, a storybook or whatever else. It really depends. For these are easy. We can just generate an NX Angular app with whatever options you want. I'm going to just use ES-Build, or I'm using Playwright instead of Cypress, and style. You can put whatever you want. And that is the output. So you have the app, and you have the end-to-end app. So you can import your libraries inside of your your app to run them, to test them, see if they actually work. And of course, the NX graph reflects that as well. An application with your documentation. You can use whatever you want. I'm going to use, for this talk, I'm going to try to use Astro Starlight framework. So a completely external framework to Angular, and NX can still manage it. So that is the command to create Starlight application. And that is the output after you follow the prompt. So you can see the package.json, package lock, no modules inside of its old folder, docs. And again, give it a project.json, give it with a name, docs, and an empty target. That's fine. And now NX can recognize that as a project. You can run NX dev docs. It will invoke a dev script inside of package.json, and it will spin up your documentation. And you can use Astro with analog JS as well. Schematics. All right, 2 minutes. ng-add, ng-update. Again, let's generate a new plugin. So my workspace plugin is local to your workspace. You don't want to publish that. But then this plugin is going to be published. All right. So we want a new generator called init. I called it init. You can call it whatever you want. Go. And to make it work for Angular CLI, we're going to make a file, another file. You can call this whatever you want to, but I'm calling it compat, which is short for compatibility. And inside of that, you can just import convert NX generator to, and then import the NX generator itself, and you export the converted generator, which will be, this is like a bridge from NX generator to Angular CLI schematics. And next is inside of generators.json file. So this is the default, the generated one. You want to add a new field called schematics on the same level of generators. And that is for NX, and this is for Angular CLI. So you can see that we call it an ng-add generator, and then we point that to the compat file. So that allows Angular CLI to recognize the ng-add generator as ng-add. Next, let's create a migration, right? This is for ng update. Generate a migration. I call it rename first entry point. That's the migrations. A new file, migration.json file, is generated as well. All right, so that is basically, now let's assume that we're ready to publish. This is the project.json of my plugin, the plugin that we want to publish. Remember, my plugin is just another library inside of your workspace, which means that they have a different output if you want to publish it, or you want to publish completely separate. However, for Angular libraries, we want to do ng add my library, right? So we want to publish this plugin alongside with my library when we publish. So we publish them all at one time. To do that, we want to change the output path of this plugin to the output of my library, and then / whatever folder you want to put this plugin in. So this output of the output of my plugin is going to be part of the output of the entire library. And then we have my library. This is a package JSON of my library. And we want to add those fields, generators, schematics, NX migrations, ng update, point to /plugin, or whatever folder you want to call, and point to the JSON files, so that Angular CLI and NX CLI can recognize these generators and migrations. Next, last but not least, hopefully, we add a new package target. Again, you can call package what you want, inside the project JSON of my library, so that we can run both build my library and build my plugin at the same time with one command. So that we build my library first, so we have that inside of the file system, the dist of the my library, and then we run my build my plugin, so that they put the plugin output into the plugin folder correctly. All right, so with that, this is the build outputs. You see that my library, there's a plugin, all with all the generators, JSON, migration, JSON, everything. Release. To enable NX release, we want to add a release property to nx.json, what project you want to release, what command you want to run, when you want to, before you run update, before NX try to update the version, I want to run NX package my library. Come on, all right. And inside of project.json of my library, you also want to have a release property. So NX release is like a new feature, so there's a lot of rough edges. So if you tried it out, let us know if we can fix it. And here we're saying that we want to update the version of the package JSON inside of the dist folder instead of your source code. And with that, we can just run NX release, first release, and this is the output. So its version is updated to 1.0, and this is the changelog that is generated, and you can use that and publish. So this is I just published this morning my ng Belgrade library. All right, and that was my talk on NX libraries. And before I go, October 7th, 2024, NX is going to organize a monorepo World Conference. If you can come, you're welcome to. The entire NX team is going to be there. And if you cannot come, there's a CFP, so you can try to apply for talks. Or you can also join by live stream, and it's free for live stream. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.